Just be you.
I just hope I could sell a lot of records, so I could pull on this coattail. Follow up.
Why you want to pull on my coattail?
Because you large, baby.
I'm saying, but it don't have to be like that. We family. The bad boys and the bad girls.
But you're all married and whatnot.
Oh yeah, no question. That's my old lady.
Which is it's kind of rare in this business for a couple to be out there. People know about it and everything. I mean, what do y'all think it represents a lot of young people out there?
Unity.
I hear you.
It's an absolute pleasure to be stood next to one of the finest R&B singer-songwriters from the early 90s to the present day. Miss Faith Evans is in Manchester right now on the King and I tour. Miss Faith Evans, how you doing, miss?
I am doing pretty all right, considering my travels today.
I believe you flew into Heathrow at 1 o'clock today. You've travelled up the motorway. You've literally just come on stage. How are you feeling?
I feel good. We had some little kerfuffles, but they weren't due to my lateness. Actually, the show wasn't late. I knew I had to get right on stage when I got out the car, so I had about an hour to get ready. But on the way here, I was like, you know what? I got to get it together. My fans are waiting, and I don't get to come here as often as I would like, so I knew I had to do a good show. It's funny because when I walked up, the promoters was like, thank you for coming. I'm like, well, I don't have a choice. I have to come. I can't leave my fans, But I'm happy to be back here. I'm glad that everybody enjoyed the show, despite the technical difficulties. But I'm excited for the shows tomorrow and Sunday.
You're promoting the King and I album right now. How did the concept come about? When did that come about in your head for that album?
To be honest, the concept for the King and I was inspired by Natalie Cole and Nat King Cole's Unforgettable. And I remember when that song was out, I was with Miss Wallace, Big's mom, and I said, wow, it would be really dope if I could do something like that one day with his vocals. And she said, you should. And we just kind of left it there. And then about 3 years ago, our attorney, he was like, hey, remember you had this idea to do this album? Why don't we should go meet with the people who acquired the masters from Bad Boy and see if they want to do business. And they were very interested. So the idea and the thought was about 15 years removed from the actual inception of creating the album. But I just knew it was special. And although it's a different climate, so people don't always know what record is out. They don't. It's not as and let me just say that because I am an R&B artist, considered traditional R&B. It's not the most commercially popular brand of music. But it's a great body of work, and I love the fact that people that have it and have had a chance to hear it, they always say that was just a genius thing. So, and I felt that when I was making it. So I know that having a body of work that's going to last and still be classic and amazing for years to come, I'm not mad at the fact that people are still finding out about it. You know what I'm saying? Because when they do hear it, they're like, oh my God, this is dope.
The sound of the album does retain a lot of the hip-hop soul sound of the mid-90s. Did you have to reach out to certain producers back then that you'd not spoke to for years to say, hey, come and produce something, make that sound again? What actually happened?
What happened? Initially, I thought that I would be working with an entire vault, so to speak, of Biggie masters. And then when I actually got to creating, I'm like, I had a list of records I wanted to use of his. And I'm like, do you have this? And they really didn't have a lot of... Unfortunately, a lot of the masters that I thought they acquired in their multi-million-dollar deal. But needless to say, I went online and found different Biggie instrumentals and different Biggie acapellas, and I started actually putting it together on my own with a producer called J. Drew Sheard, who's the son of one of the Clark sisters. Then I went and saw what Rhino did have in their catalog. I worked with that. Then I got with some producers like Salam Remy, Just Blaze, Chucky Thompson, even Stevie J. They had certain Biggie acapellas and masters that they were going to use for a remix album that never happened. So I kind of got lucky in that. Although Rhino didn't have certain things I wanted, the producers I knew I wanted to work with still had things that were gems for me to work with. So it came together not quite how I thought it would, but it was still just the whole process. I felt like, damn, you're not doing a bad job. And I actually felt like Big was smiling down, like, you better do your thing,
I just want to go back to the pre-Bad Boy record days to a time period where you was writing songs for none other than Mary J Blige, amongst others. Did you sign a deal with Uptown Records at the time? What was actually going on?
That is so funny that your history, because me and Little C's just recently had lunch with Albie Shore. And as long as C's has known me, he didn't even know my history prior to when he met me with Biggie and I was signed to Bad Boy. And I'm like, I was telling him all these stories. My daughter's dad, who you mentioned with 3 Boys from North, Kayama Griffin, he was a producer and songwriter, and they were working with Christopher Williams. I was in college, so I was, not necessarily looking for a record deal. I always had the gift of singing and writing music, but it was a hobby in terms of me being a vocal producer. It was just something I learned how to do. I met Al B. Short through Kayama Griffin, and Al heard me sing a demo that I had done just, on the humble, and like, wow, that's you? So one day I came to the studio with my daughter looking for her dad, and he had disappeared. And Al told me, well, don't leave. I heard this song you sang, and I want you to come every day and sing all my demos. And me being a girl on welfare with a new baby at the time, him saying, hey, I'm going to pay you. I started getting like $2,500 a week just to come show up at the studio and demo Al B. Sure's songs that he was trying to shop to other artists. So to be quite honest, I think without me even really being fully aware, Al was probably in the process of trying to get me signed to his production situation at Uptown. Not that we had a deal in place, but once I did a little session for Puff and he said he wanted to sign me, that's when I realized he knew about me already from Al saying, Al used to call me the doctor. Like, that's the doctor. She fixes anything, So it was like, I didn't know I had a little cult following kind of, sort of, because of my little demos and background vocals. So although I didn't know I would be a recording artist, it was kind of like just already laid out for me because the work I had done already just as a hobby and being around people in the business had like, wow, whoever she is, she's dope. So even though I thought I might be a girl singing in a hotel lobby making money, I ended up singing on a recording and making money.
Wow. In my opinion, you wrote some of the greatest songs for Mary J Blige.
Oh, wow.
People don't realise this. When you look back to them tracks now, do you think, should I have given them away, some of them songs?
To be quite honest, when I was working on Mary's My Life album, that I was actually in the process of negotiating my Bad Boy deal. When I met Puff, he was working on the Usher's first album, and then after that was Mary's My Life. So I was in the process of being signed to Bad Boy Records at that time. Those weren't necessarily songs for me. Puff had an assembly line going on. Like, he would have the entire Hit Factory studio, all 6 to 8 studios booked up with different projects. So it would be like I would go in one studio, he'd say, I need a hook. It was a Mary song. Oh, I need a bridge. This is an Usher record. And what happened was he ended up using all of my demo vocals that I did, my backgrounds, he kept them on Mary's records. So to kind of add to what your question was, people, when I first came out, the comparison with me and Mary, I think initially came from the fact that a lot of my vocals were on her My Life record. You know what I mean? So people kind of heard a familiar sound and they heard it on her record, probably not realizing that, well, that little part was me singing. So, I've never taken that comparison like in any bad way. I thought it was a great thing. But, people just, if they read credits, would know, oh, that's her singing that part, But I would not claim that those records were for me. They were clearly Mary J Blige records that Puff wanted me to sprinkle my little Faith Evans on.
The song Soon As I Get Home, was that from personal experience, and how did the collaboration, the remix, come with Aaron Hall?
Oh, that's so funny. The song Soon As I Get Home, although it's a very first person story, I actually wrote that song from the perspective of, this is what I would love for Big to be saying to me. Because when we first got married, he blew up right away. Like, neither one of us knew we were going to be where we were. But he obviously was out the gate, bam, and we had just gotten married. So we didn't get a chance to really consummate in our relationship in our home. And it was like, damn, I really wish this is something he would say to me. And, when I tell people that story, it's like, oh, wow, okay, that's kind of fly. It was like, damn, I wish he'd be like, baby, as soon as I get home, I got you.
Your biggest club track, especially in the UK, is Love Like This. Now, a lot of 90s R&B, even Y2K R&B, took from samples. When you got in the studio, did you realise it was Chic Cheer you were singing over?
I did, and I knew I had to make it a fucking hot record. Because that song was just already on its own, just one of those joints, like yank, 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 yank. I came up with the melody for the hook, and rest in peace, a good friend of mine who used to sing background for me, he had some words, but it was like broken promises, and I'm like, I don't think I like that. Like, I like the da 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 da. I had the melody, but it couldn't have been Broken Promises. I don't think y'all would be partying to Broken Promises 20 years later, you know what I mean? So I was like, let me just try and get a little phrase that feels better in that little cadence. And it was love like this before. And I had just, fallen in love with my ex-husband. So, I think all of those emotions and feelings kind of went into that hook. I had to make it right.
Finally, today's R&B trap sound does have a lot of 90s influences in it. How are you feeling about the sound today?
I respect everybody creatively who finds an audience for themselves. Being a creative and being a creative person that has children who are creative, I have to understand the whole climate right now and understand what makes, I ask my kids, what makes him dope? You play this all the time. And, they're musically knowledgeable enough to understand, oh, well, he has great hooks, or I like how he does his ad-libs, you know what I mean? But it helps me to understand things that I may not just directly get. Like, well, what makes that so dope? But I'm not a creative that hates on things that aren't like what I do. I mean, I understand that the more things change, the more they stay the same. People are still influenced by what I did, by what Big did, by what all of my peers did. And I'm blessed to still be able to be here and continue to do it,
Faith Evans, I want to thank you so much for your time. Your music will live forever, and I appreciate you.
Thank
the
you.
Listeners appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
I want you, I need you in my life. Can't you see what you mean to me? Baby, come hold me tight. I miss you, wanna kiss you every time I see your face. Baby, I'll be waiting for you each and every day.
I remember